up being an invisible tax on South Carolina families. That will be no more when Alan Wilson and Mike Reichenbach get elected next year or take office next year. That is why today we are announcing for the Wilson Reichenbach administration that on day one we are going to implement independent preventative performance audits that will make South Carolina government more efficient and more proactive for South Carolina families. The Families First Audit Initiative will make recommendations to the General Assembly in the first year of the Wilson Reichenbach administration. These recommendations and these actions will include sunsetting archaic regulations that should have died years ago. This audit initiative is going to identify and eliminate wasteful spending. It's going to identify and eliminate abusive practices and policies that hurt South Carolina families and South Carolina businesses. It is going to identify and refer for criminal prosecution corruption at all levels of government, whether it's school district or state agencies. It is going to look for and identify that. That is what the Families First Audit Initiative is going to do. It is going to identify and recommend the use of state-of-the-art emerging technologies like cryptography, artificial intelligence, blockchain technologies. These are technologies that make it impossible for South Carolina families to be defrauded with state government monies and state government practices and policies. We will use the most advanced state-of-the-art technologies, and we will implement those at all levels of government to protect the taxpayer and to protect South Carolina families. This initiative puts families first, not bureaucracy. There's also, who am I going to put at the head of this Families First Audit Initiative? None other than my running mate, State Senator Mike Reichenbach. Mike Reichenbach is a man who has grown a business during the worst of times that South Carolina could possibly fathom, during the 2008 financial crisis. This is a guy who basically had to innovate, had to become more efficient, had to make cuts in his business to not only survive the 2008 financial crisis, but to thrive in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. Now, what is the problem? And in a moment, you're going to hear from Mike, but I want to set the stage for you. I want to set the table for what the problem is. South Carolina currently has three primary audit entities: the Legislative Audit Council, which resides in the legislative branch of government. It also has the Office of the State Inspector General, and it also has the State Auditor. Oftentimes, these organizations are reactionary, not proactive. Oftentimes, these agencies can run in silos where they're not synchronized. One of the primary points of this initiative is to synchronize the two executive branch auditing vehicles, the State Auditor and the State Inspector General, and to synchronize them with the Legislative Audit Council. A lot of times, these auditing and oversight organizations, they're good at finding problems after taxpayer dollars have already been defrauded or wasted or abused. By way of example, last summer, my office was involved in a $20 million fraud scheme involving South Carolina Medicaid. It was a almost 5-year investigation. Obviously, we caught the bad guys working with the Department of Health and Human Services, but with South Carolina, did it have the right policies? Did it have the right procedures? Did it have the right technologies to prevent that $20 million in fraud from occurring? That $20 million of fraud was an invisible tax on hardworking South Carolina families. We want to eliminate that from ever happening again. There is no unified, proactive system to ensure agencies are performing well before the failures in state government occur. Our government needs to run efficiently on the front end. Think of how the police for reckless driving or people who drive too fast for conditions on public roads. Do the police officers in the highway patrol stay at their headquarters waiting on someone to report that someone is speeding or driving recklessly or driving under the influence? No. They're out there proactively driving on the roads of South Carolina looking for reckless drivers and people who are speeding. That both acts as a deterrent to people who speed and people who are reckless drivers, but it also allows us to catch those who are violating the safety laws on the South Carolina highways in South Carolina. Shouldn't state government oversight operate the way that we police the roads here in South Carolina? I submit to you that we should. We should be more proactive, both for deterrence purposes, but also for holding government actors, whether they're at school districts or in state agencies or in between. It needs to hold them accountable. Government actors need to act the way business owners act, as if at any given moment someone could come in and audit their books. If government actors acted that way, then I think government would be a lot more efficient and a lot more appropriate with the tax dollars given to them. Now, when we take office next January, when I'm going to put Mike Reichenbach as the chairman of the Families First Audit Initiative. The reason I'm putting Mike Reichenbach there is that the Office of Lieutenant Governor has an opportunity to lead a proactive initiative to help support and protect South Carolina families, to make living in South Carolina more affordable for families and profitable for businesses. I'm going to put Mike in charge of that, to bring all of the stakeholders together in state government, as well as liaising and coordinating with the legislative branch of government, so that we can come up with forward-thinking ideas that would adhere to these 5 tenets of this initiative, which you're going to hear about in just a second. So with that being said, I would like to ask Mike to come step up and talk a little bit about his background and why and what he plans to do with this initiative. Mike?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. A.G. Wilson touched upon the what. I'm going to briefly touch upon the who and the why. I'm going to start off with the who. I'm your state senator for District 31, but before that, my undergraduate degree is in accounting. I've got an MBA from one of the top business schools in the United States. I served on an internal audit team for a Fortune 500 company where we didn't do just reactive audits, we did proactive audits. Now, that's a very important distinction because reactive audit teams go in after problems arise. Reactive audit teams, of which I was a lead of, we would go in before there were issues to figure out how we could be more efficient, how we could optimize operations better and run the companies better. The reactive auditing team is really what this initiative is going to be here when we take over. Why shouldn't the government approach business from this aspect the same way, where don't just be reactive, be proactive? In addition to corporate experience as an auditor, my wife, Sharice, who's also my business partner, in 2008, we bought our first business. Within weeks, the Great Recession really took hold. And for those of you who remember 2008, those were very, very dark days. We had left corporate America with the vision of making a better life for ourselves as well as our employees. And our 60 employees counted on us to make tough decisions, to reduce expenses, to manage the business better. A lot of nights, Sharice and I laid awake at night, and we tried to figure out, how do you make payroll? How do you pay your quarterly taxes? How do we take care of our vendors? In the lives of our 60 employees and their families, the financial future is rested on being reactive as well as proactive to the business conditions at the time. The only way Sharice and I kept our business afloat was to have absolute maniacal adherence to financial principles, to manage expenses with diligence, to look for efficiencies, and quite frankly, we did a lot of praying because those were tough days. Managing the operations of state government could benefit from some of that same rigor because it's not our money in government, it's the taxpayer money. Government, we don't have revenues of our own, we have the revenues of taxpayers, and if we treated each dollar as though it's yours because it is, we would run with that same degree of rigor. And I'm glad Attorney General Wilson also recognizes the need for that same degree of rigor. So now as to the why, you can see the 5 tenets over there, the 5 elements. The first one, protecting South Carolina families. When A.G. Wilson and I were first talking about running together, he asked me what I wanted my role to be. And the very first question that came to mind was families. How can government and public policy help families? And the 2 questions that came to mind is spend less and spend wisely. And that's what we can do from a public policy perspective. These independent performance audits will evaluate whether agencies are truly serving families and communities or becoming part of the bloated bureaucracy that spends recklessly with no return back to you, the taxpayers. These audits will also ensure that the resources are directed to where they matter most: education, public safety, healthcare, infrastructure, economic stability, making South Carolina a better place to live, to work, and to raise a family. A second key element is strengthening accountability. Independent audits keep agencies aligned with the values and the priorities of South Carolinians. And clear expectations, clear consequences, and measurable results have to be the rule of the day. The saying goes, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that should apply to government because it's your money. So let's measure it and let's manage where it's going. I'm going to transition back to A.G. Wilson now to cover the last three tenets.
So that third tenet you see on the board there, maximizing efficiency, that is absolutely paramount to what this organization is going to do. And by the way, I keep calling it an organization. This is not a new organization. This is not making government bigger. This is taking resources already in government, taking a lieutenant governor and putting them to marshal the resources of government to come up with a roadmap to how to make government more efficient. But maximizing efficiency, the principal reason for having this is to identify fraud, waste, and abuse. The way that Mike and Sharice had to do with their businesses to identify more, or I guess more efficient ways to do things when there was less of an economic boom. This will ensure taxpayer dollars are spent effectively and not wasted efficiently or on mismanagement. Another thing a fourth tenet that we want to talk about is informed decision making. Mike just said it, and I've heard the governor say this, that you can't effectively manage a problem until you accurately and adequately measure the problem. We need to provide real data-driven insights so that we can make really good recommendations to the legislature and to members of the Wilson Reichenbach administration. Again, you have to have good information. You have to have accurate information. The information has to be transparent. That is why informed decision-making will be one of the major tenets of this initiative. And building public trust. At the end of the day, if the public doesn't trust the officials, if the public doesn't trust the processes, we have lost the trust of the public, then we have failed the public. Transparency builds confidence in South Carolina families, and they deserve nothing less than have confidence that the people acting on their behalf in government are going to deliver real results for them. Again, this initiative shifts audits from damage control to early prevention, fraud, waste, and abuse. Problems will be identified and corrected before they grow costly or before they even occur. Government should prevent failure, not just document it after it happens. I want to close now. At the core, the North Star of the Wilson Reichenbach administration will be to put families first. Every issue, whether it's infrastructure, energy, immigration, government spending inefficiency, judicial selection reform, whatever the issue is out there, at the end of the day is the position that we take making South Carolina's economy more affordable for families and more profitable for business, because if it doesn't, then we will not do it. Everything that this Families First audit initiative will do will be to audit state government, to identify the best policies and procedures, and to make and suggest generational and transformational reforms that will make South Carolina the North Star for the entire Southeast. It will make South Carolina the envy of the country. We are going to promote and advance the most advanced technologies known to man: cryptography, artificial intelligence, blockchain technology. We're going to implement these at every level of state government to make it impossible for South Carolina taxpayers to be defrauded and for practices and policies and spending to be wasteful or abusive. We will make South Carolina affordable for families and profitable for businesses, and that will start on day one of the Wilson Reichenbach administration. I am happy to take any questions that you may have. Nick.
So I'd like a little bit more clarification on who's going to be doing this work. So we named 3 different agencies that already kind of do audits right
Yeah.
now. They're not in a position where they can act proactively, as you said, but we've seen things where the agencies, talk about needing more resources to identify kind of sunset regulations, like obviously more investigative powers. Are we talking about leveraging just the existing entities we have for each agency?
Yeah. So first, the Families First audit initiation is not creating new positions. It is not going to grow or expand government in any way. The Families First, the entire purpose of the Families First audit initiative is to keep government spending lower, make government more innovative, make government more efficient. We're going to use existing positions. When I'm governor, I'm going to task the lieutenant governor with basically chairing the Families First Audit Initiative. That will include the state auditor, the state inspector general's office. We will invite from the legislative branch of government those that have oversight authority, including the Legislative Audit Council, because we want every stakeholder that has their hand on the wheel of state government spending, and state government policy implementation. We want them to have a seat at the table. Then this initiative, this audit initiative, is going to basically identify what major structural reforms in government need to occur. Then it's going to recommend a roadmap to the General Assembly for passing legislation that will allow us to initiate those reforms. It's going to make recommendations on sunsetting archaic and outdated regulations that should not be on the books right now. It is going to make recommendations on the types of technologies that need to be used. There are other organizations. People talk about Doge in government. There's an organization out there called Doge SC that Ram Reddy is running. I'm a huge supporter of what they're trying to do. And again, what we're trying to do is just the same thing by a different name. We want government to be more efficient, to be more accountable, more transparent for South Carolina families. And we intend to marshal all the resources of government together so that we can make the necessary cuts. Like Mike said, they had to make significant cuts when the 2008 crisis hit their business. They had to innovate. They had to become more efficient. In state government, the market forces don't have the same impact. Government actors don't feel the burn. They don't feel the need. They don't worry about their co-workers' families and whether they're going to be able to feed their families. They don't worry about that because those market forces don't exist in government. We're going to inject those market forces into state government. We're going to make people think about, is the way that you run your agency, are the policies that you implement, are the way that you spend, how you spend, is it benefiting South Carolina families? If you are defrauding or being wasteful or being abusive, you either need to be rooted out and pulled out of government completely, or you need to be prosecuted if you're committing a crime. And that is why we will refer criminal actions for prosecution. But the rest of it is policy driven. You can't prosecute and litigate your way out of bad government. You can prosecute corrupt government and you can litigate out of unlawful government, but sometimes government is just bad. There are people who are bad at their jobs. They're wasteful with the money. They're abusive with their practices. They don't think about innovation and efficiency. We're going to force government to think about innovation and efficiency because South Carolina families deserve no less.
You mentioned independent audit too. We're talking about like hiring like a Maynard Nexon or Deloitte to look at stuff.
When we get into office, Mike is going to chair this Families First Audit Initiative, and it's going to consider all of that. We're going to bring in all the stakeholders. We're going to identify what metrics that we need to measure, what information do we need. If it requires independent audit, then that is something we may go to the legislature for. But it will be comprehensive. It will be holistic. And at the end of the day, every single thing that this Families First Audit Initiative will seek to do is to put families first. The cost of living needs to go down, and profits for businesses need to go up. Everything will go to that end.
Mr. Attorney General.
Yes.
The Lieutenant Governor's office is not well-defined.
It's not defined at all.
Not defined at all in their role. So what do you think of the current administration use of the Lieutenant Governor's office as it sits right now?
So I'm not here to attack or to talk down about the role of the Lieutenant Governor. The current occupant of the Lieutenant Governor's office inherited the office the way that it was. Currently, it is a part-time job. It is a ceremonial job. It pays $46,000 a year. In fact, when I was talking to Mike about this, I said, are you sure you want to consider leaving the state Senate where you're gaining seniority to come to an office that really has no actual teeth in it? And he said he did because he's an executive at heart, and he wanted to help me transform the executive branch of government. So one of the things that we're going to focus on with the Putting Families First Audit Initiative is to how to give legislative statutory teeth to the Lieutenant Governor. I'm not aware that there has actually been a proposal in the last 10 years on how to, or the last 8 years on how to make the Lieutenant Governor's office actually have a fiscal role in the administration of government. And so that is one of the things that we're looking through the windshield. We're going to look at ways to make the role of the Lieutenant Governor more prominent. We're going to actually give the Lieutenant Governor actual statutory roles and responsibilities. And those are things that will come out of this initiative when we start on day one of the Wilson Reichenbach administration.
So what do you think the current occupant of the Lieutenant Governor's office is doing right now?
Again, I'm looking through the windshield. I want to look through South Carolina's future. I'm not looking to South Carolina's past. That's why I picked Mike Reichenbach. I want to make sure that I have the kind of person who knows how to be efficient, who knows how to be innovative. I want a person with me who can help me get South Carolina from good to great. I picked Mike Reichenbach for that role. I've seen what he's done as a business leader. I've seen what he's done as a leader in the state Senate, and I know what he's going to do as a leader for all of South Carolina, and that's why he's in this role today.
General Wilson, when you talk about statutory changes, can you talk about what this would entail in order to get some more authority there for the LG's office, but also what it can entail for some of these offices too? They're going to a more proactive approach. What that would mean for the state, state inspector general and other offices. How does that work, going from this concept to having to get it passed?
So the Families First Audit Initiative, it is a policy, it's a creation of policy, a directive that I'm going to make, that I'm announcing right now that we're going to do in 11 months when I take office. The purpose of it is to identify all those things that we know that need fixing, identify those things that we don't know, we know that exist, but we don't know what the solution is, to find a solution, and then identify those unknown unknowns, things that we can do that we don't yet even think about doing. But the whole purpose of it is to take a holistic view of government. How efficient is government with the power and the money that is given to it by the people and the taxpayers? How transparent is it with the power that is given by the people and the taxpayers? Are government actors and state agencies, county agencies, municipal agencies, school districts, are they being responsible and predictable and accountable with the power and the money that we give them? And by the way, that goes for me as Attorney General and as the next governor of South Carolina. I mean, all of us should fall under this umbrella. Families in South Carolina deserve to have a transparent government that is accountable and accessible to them, and that is the whole purpose of this initiative, to bring all the current agencies together, to bring all the stakeholders together, all the leadership of not just the executive branch of government, but the legislative branch of government, to come up with a roadmap to make South Carolina more transparent, more efficient, more accountable, more innovative. That is the whole purpose of this. Someone else had a question over here? Thank you guys so much. We appreciate your time.
Can I grab you really quick? I tried to talk.